All right. This is going to be fun. I have Joseph Gunn from Viki, our really first partner in the digital cash area. And this is really a delight to have interview you, Joseph. Welcome.
Thank you, Kim.
You are, it's early morning for me. You are in Singapore, and that means it must be afternoon for you, isn't it?
That's correct.
Yeah. Based in Singapore, and you, the whole company, Viki, you are founder or a co-founder.
That's right.
I see
I'm
that.
one of the co-founders.
Yeah.
Currently the CEO, actually. I did actually start out as the CTO 10 years ago. So do forgive me if I slip into tech speak. it's an old habit. Yeah. But yeah, we are mostly in Singapore. We are about 100 people today. About just a bit more than half in Singapore, with a chunk in Vietnam as well, where we do have some backend engineers. And then the rest is mostly sales and some remote engineering around the world.
Yeah, I know you have a team in India. We're interacting with your team in India. And you are in Chennai, I think, and we are more Mumbai and Delhi.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. And what I like to explore with you is digital trust, because it is we come with our offline wallet, which is sort of I think the banks get scared because it's sort of something that you're going to hold on a phone. I talk one interview we released today actually was the one on CBDC, central bank digital currency, and they're all talking about a bearer instrument. That you hold something actually in your on a mobile phone, that you have some security there. So it's a really interesting topic to us too, and I know you are. I see, I've been following you, Joseph, for a while, and I see you quite often comment that, oh look, this is not as secure as you think it is, and just give me a feeling for digital trust. How does, if we start with you, what you do, how do you go about to provide digital trust in an unsecure and threatening world?
Yeah, I think maybe it's helpful to understand where I come from.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think like many people, I started as an engineer, computer science and all that. But really my first job, and for most of my career, I was in the Ministry of Defense in Singapore.
Okay.
And, this was really around the birth of cybersecurity, right? And really nascent area at the time, very little awareness about security. And what it meant was that, wow, there were so many security problems. And our job was really to try to figure out in those early days how we could make sure that, the government systems remain secure from attackers who were very determined to try to break into our systems, right? I think the good news is that, for the most part on our servers, on our desktops or laptops today, and even from a network perspective, we do generally have fairly good solutions, right? So I think we understand that quite well. You have good firewalls, you have at least a basic antivirus in place, if not a full-blown host intrusion protection system. You have all your network monitoring, network intrusion protection systems. Of course, today you have all your anomaly detection and your artificial intelligence around some of these more advanced attacks. So there's really a lot going on. And so even when we started a company 10 years ago, we looked at all this as like, okay, great, networks were fine, servers were fine, desktops were fine, but Steve Jobs had launched the iPhone a few years before that, and we're like,
yes, 2006.
Mobile phones are not fine, right? What you had was, you had this, BSD like, iOS operating system, and of course, Android is starting to gain traction. Android is just pure Linux, and especially in those days, Android was really wide open, right? And we could see the number of Android malwares growing like by 1 million every year. And even today, of course, we still do have quite a big problem around malwares on iOS and Android. And even though I think Apple and Google have, done actually a very fantastic job trying to lock down the operating system since then, right? But if you think about it, even today, nobody expects your Windows operating system to be a secure operating system, right? We end up installing antiviruses. Windows at least has a Windows Defender. You can install a whole bunch of stuff to try to make sure that you're not hacked. But of course, people still get hacked, right?
Yeah.
And the problem is on a mobile phone, just the way the ecosystem has developed, the way that Apple and even Google are limiting kind of what applications can do on the platform, also means that actually it's a lot harder for security software to come online and say, okay, now you just install this antivirus or install this intrusion protection system and everything's going to be hunky-dory, right? It just hasn't quite worked out that way. And I think the problem is then, as an enterprise, maybe a bank or a wallet provider or even a government, right? When you think about, okay, I need to launch an application for my banking users, for my wallet users, or maybe as a neobank, financial services, citizen services as a government, the product could be running on millions of devices, maybe about, depending on whether it's an urban population, maybe half iOS, half Android. In the developing world, of course, much more Android. But on both platforms, we do see that there's still a fairly high percentage of users and devices that in the end, we just can't trust, right? You can't assume that just because it's an iOS device means everything's going to be fine, right? The user, everything's going to be fine. There are no keyloggers, there are no SMS stealers, whatever we put in the iOS keychain around the private keys and all that is going to remain secret. Because unfortunately, you do have jailbreaks, you do have rooting attacks, you do have malwares and rootkits and all the stuff we are kind of used to seeing in our servers and desktops are actually still possible on your iOS and Android, which really just are Unix-based operating systems.
I guess sort of, Joseph, the aspect that it's as actually a device that just sits on the, if you have a server on your premise, you could sort of track it. It's there, and you can sort of have, I guess, some management tools on it. But it's a bigger challenge if this is these are devices that are sort of, if you're a bank, this is devices that are held by their customers, and they don't necessarily have, they are remote devices, peripheral devices to their whole core, and I guess that presents an additional challenge.
Absolutely correct, right? I mean, across our customer base, we have about 100 million installations of VUS today. And you can imagine that, if you are AWS, you say, oh, my stuff is 99.9% reliable and that kind of stuff. And you think that's good enough, right? But if you've got 100 million users, 99.9% reliability means you've got 100,000 users that are broken or compromised in some way, right?
Yeah, that's a lot.
And the reality is we're actually seeing a few percent of users who actually have malware on their device that are actually compromised in some serious fashion, right? It's not just about being, jailbreaking or rooting their device. They may have, Trojans. Of course, banking malwares are typically the most serious. They have, malware is collecting data, spying on them, and so on. And you're right. I think the question that we were set out to solve is how in the world do we ensure that that banking or wallet application, the use case you talked about, offline cash, right? How do we make sure that that wallet is secure even amidst all of this?
Yeah.
And I think, what we've really done is we've taken a leaf out of the smart card world, right? We have these smart cards in our credit cards, our ATM cards, and depending on country, sometimes our identity cards and definitely our biometric passports have this chip in there, which is able to store our data and digital identity securely. But this chip isn't really available in the mobile device or in the mobile application. So we developed a virtual chip, effectively, without going into too much technical details. But it's architected like a hardware smart card chip, and we've gone for lots of certifications all around the world, and of course penetration tests and all that as well, to basically prove to ourselves and our customers that this is just as secure as what we are used to in the hardware world, so that we can now depend on it.
Certification, Joseph, it's called, let's see if I can get it right, Common Criteria EAL 3+.
That's correct. So we actually got it from Germany.
No one knows what that, I don't know what EAL stands for, but what does that, because that's a high certification level, isn't it? What does, could you explain that to me? What does that mean in terms of what have they certified you for, that you are now Common Criteria EAL 3+?
Correct. So, I mean, 3+ is not the highest in the world that we could ever get, but it's definitely the highest in the world around mobile security solutions. And around exactly what you have asked, around kind of a standard that is well accepted internationally. So in fact, we got a common criteria based on what we call a protection profile that was actually issued by the US around general purpose operating systems. So this is actually a protection profile that the US recognizes for their own FIPS 140-2 certification standard, which is a US and Canadian federal government certification, which we also have gotten prior to our common criteria. But it's a US protection profile for general purpose operating systems.
Okay.
So actually our technology, which we call VOS for virtual operating system, actually has been certified as a general purpose operating system, but that kind of VOS actually resides within the mobile application and it's pretty much seamless to the end user.
Yeah, and I guess what I learned because it's so great to have partners like you, because you learn so much about technology, and what I understand that what you provide and you're certified to provide is a secure runtime, sort of a trusted execution environment for if we bring our applications within your vault or your sort of smart software-based smart chip. If we run inside there. The data can be securely sort of stored there, like we have an offline balance, for instance, that we want to store, but also the execution, which is an important part, is also safe within your environment, isn't it? Your operating.
That's correct. So very often when we talk about security, actually we're talking about a number of different things, right? Very often, yes, the confidentiality of the data, and very importantly, sometimes the cryptographic keys that are used is important, we protect it, and a lot of our focus is in that space. The integrity of the processing is often seen as quite critical as well, as you talked about, for example, balances and all that. If you have a $10 wallet and I say deduct $1, you kind of need to trust that $1 is really taken away, not have to try to second guess it. And of course, you can still put systems around it, and there are ways to mitigate it as well. And even with viewers, I'm not saying you don't do anything else, right? You know, we do work very closely with our customers and partners to kind of architect the cryptography and the security flows. But we can solve that integrity portion of the problem as well, which then, you know, goes a long way towards giving a lot of trust in then this use case to know that, okay, now I know this is secret, this is, you know, untampered, and the application itself can be trusted to do what I've actually programmed it to do, right? We could have lots of business logic in there. You know, we talked about biometrics, we've talked about risk engines, we've talked about fraud detection. But in the end, if all these are Java codes or iOS codes and the attacker just goes in and, you know, just says, oh, yes, it's jailbroken phone, never mind, let me just bypass this. Then all the, you know, best laid plans of mice and men in your application just fall away. So our job we see is to make sure that all these systems can continue to be trusted and can continue to be relied upon in order to deploy the digital solutions. And yeah, Joachim, you know, I'm very happy to be partnering with partners like you guys, because, you know, there's no way we can build everything under the sun, right? In the end, we do see that VOS is quite a foundational technology, and we have rolled out, of course, a number of, you know, fairly foundational use cases. For example, just protecting a mobile application is something that we consider fairly basic. But then building some sort of cash platform for mobile wallets, well, you know, that's more than we can bite off. So I think we're happy to partner with you guys and really help deliver a full trusted end-to-end solution around that.
Yeah. What if we go back a little bit, scale out? What other verticals do you see? Because certainly mobile wallets to protect that, you know, is one vertical that is important for you. The banking, but there's what verticals are your technology used for? Do you think where do you see use for VOS, the operating system that you provide?
Yeah, actually, if you look at just globally, looking at a smart card ecosystem, right? Just very generically, smart cards, actually about half of smart cards are used in our SIM cards that we use for our mobile phone to authenticate to the telcos that we want to connect to for voice call encryption, you know, to prove that we are this phone number and so on. So the telecommunications industry around SIM cards, and probably more explicitly, you know, probably IoT type embedded SIM cards is an area that we do see a lot of interest from our customers and partners in. And as I said, that's about half of the smart card market traditionally. So that's obviously one huge market where we do see that, yeah, you know, you kind of need the security to store the keys to prove this, you know, virtual SIM card's identity to the telco so that they can say, yes, you're allowed to connect to my network. Yeah. And, you know, in an IoT use case, of course, there will be some use cases where you don't need any security and you're like, yeah, you just store those keys in clear. That's fine. There will be some use cases, like even in some of our own mobile phones, where we don't mind having a full-featured hardware SIM card. But there's this huge area in the middle around IoT use cases where very often they do need their security. But very often it's a low-powered, small form factor application. But we can actually put the VOS in various low-powered chipsets and have it basically act as an IoT SIM card. So telecommunications is definitely one area. Another emerging area for us is definitely in the area of smart cities and smart buildings. Yeah. So we do have partners delivering things like energy monitoring solutions, delivering things like lift monitoring systems and other IoT monitoring systems that again are doing certain trusted operations, and they may have, as you go to more advanced solutions, some control over the IoT subsystems as well. And again, there's then a need for them to both authenticate to the backend as well as be able to validate backend commands. So there are a lot of use cases around how viewers can both secure that communication to the backend, but also even kind of have a way for a physical end user to authenticate to these IoT devices from, for example, a trusted mobile application. Another big area for us is actually in this area of kind of transportation or access control. We have a lot of use cases. Of course, automotive is one obvious example. I think we're all looking forward to a keyless entry future where we don't need to carry our physical car keys, but we can do everything from our mobile phones, just like we do everything else today.
So no one else can just take your car and...
That's right, yeah. But sure, I mean, that's going to take 5-10 years before the manufacturers build that into the cars. But we're seeing a lot of use cases where people are putting this into the aftermarket systems. Yeah. For example, tracking of commercial vehicles, or for driver identification platforms, similarly, to unlock the starter motor on your car, to use your mobile application rather than carrying around some other physical card or key fob. Why not use the mobile device for that? Or, of course, your office door access as well. I think we're slowly again moving to an era where we can use our mobile phones or biometrics, but not just relying again on the physical cards and devices to gain access to our offices. Yeah. So these are, I think, some of the interesting areas. But yeah, lots of exciting stuff that we're trying to support our partners in.
Yeah, I think you certainly is sort of, as you said, a core technology. And as you say, we're moving towards mobiles more and more, and a lot of things is being processed there. So you need to protect that environment as well, just like we have already protected, as you started with the desktop and the servers and so on. So it's and that's, I think, where you're coming in. The fact that you are doing it because there are hardware secure elements on mobiles as well. How would you like to characterize sort of the difference between your approach to do it completely just in software with what is available in mobile devices using the trusted execution environment on the chip of the mobile?
Yeah, fantastic question, I think. As a security professional, I always recommend to customers, if there is hardware available, please make sure we are able to maximize the use of that hardware, right? Yeah. So for example, on iOS devices, there is an iOS keychain, which in more recent iPhones is at least hardware-backed via the secure enclave. And there are some problems with it. It's not a perfect solution. We'll talk a bit more about it later, but still, there is an additional layer of security there that definitely should be leveraged. And there'll also be use cases where that is sufficient for the use case in order for it to be secure. I tell my customers and my own team as well, right? We're not going to be in all the 1 million mobile applications on the App Store and Play Store, right? But there are probably, 10,000 of them that really do require a bit more security than what is available to them from the default ecosystem. And those are the kind of use cases that we should try to support, right? Yeah. And you're right, even for IoT use cases, there may be situations where whether the hardware chipset or just the system on chip has sufficient protections and hardware cryptography in place to be able to support the use case. Now, but the challenge we've seen, not just in the mobile world, but in the IoT world, and even increasingly in places like servers and desktops, is that we may have hardware that's available to us really at a very foundational level, right? So just to take the example of, let's say, Android TE, right? So there will be a number of high-end smartphones, from Samsung and others, which will say, oh, I have Samsung Knox, I have some sort of TE in here. If you are the government, just build on this platform and everything will be hunky-dory. And that's fine. It does help. It does add a layer of security. But many of these ecosystems, whether it's just a hardware chip or, like ARM Trust Zone, or something a bit more full-featured like the trusted execution environments, which may be available in some form to the mobile applications. The problem with hardware is the very basis for the hardware security is the fact that it is isolated from what we call the rich operating system, right? There are limited interfaces into the hardware, right? If I have let's say a door access card, right? I put into a smart card reader, I tap it against the door. I can't actually read the door, right? I can't read what's happening on an Android operating system because the Android operating system can't access my trusted execution environment. Now, what that does mean, though, is that the security actually stops at that layer. And we've seen a lot of attacks, what we call the kind of the equivalence of code lifting attacks, or what we call code injection attacks. So just taking an example of an Android TE, for example, it has to accept, let's say, a payments request coming from a payment wallet, right? Oh, I've loaded this trusted application. I want to sign this transaction for this NFC cardless, contactless payment. You send this thing, the TE says, yes, I'll sign this transaction using these tokenized keys. Out comes the transaction cryptogram, you send it over NFC, the point of sale terminal accepts it, everything's fine. But the problem is, if an attacker is in the middle of this process, the attacker has gained access to the mobile application, or the attacker has gained access to the mobile operating system, the attacker can send the same request to the TE, and the TE will respond with the same legitimate response. Because the TE has no way to properly validate the operating system on application, this attack then becomes possible for an attacker because that's the interface where the isolation is the weak spot for hardware. We've seen this a lot in government state-sponsored attacks, unfortunately, especially with email decryptions and so on. We have seen this with code lifting attacks, especially against other software solutions such as white box cryptography, which may not be as well bound between the runtime protections and the cryptography. But this in general is the problem with hardware security. So even though we do try to leverage hardware wherever it's possible, what we also try to do is we add in that level of kind of security at the application layer so that the business logic and the processing at the application layer is now bound to that hardware. So we can bind it from both a process and a cryptographic perspective so that an attacker who is not going through our application, through our VUS, will not be able to either authenticate to the TE, for example, or even if they can access a cryptographic key in the iOS keychain, just access to the key alone without coming through our protected application will not allow them to sign, for example, a contactless card transaction.
Okay, so the combination is the...
Exactly. So it's a combination of hardware and the protected software that actually then builds a very robust end-to-end solution.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never thought of that, but that's and I guess also the fact that you are in software, your sort of secure elements that you provide, doesn't that give you a little bit more flexibility in terms of upgrading and everything that goes with having it in software instead of having it in hardware? Because then it's sort of firmware and it's sort of less. I just feel it's just. Yeah, it's harder to work with if it's just on a hardware basis rather than a software. I don't know if that is a criteria as well you would argue.
Yeah, so there are actually a couple of benefits over hardware. Upgradability is one definite issue. We have seen issues, for example, I think the fairly well publicized Estonia hack 1 or 2 years ago, where there were some weaknesses in how the smart card software was designed or configured. They actually had to physically replace this kind of digital kind of smart card stuff that were being physically held by the citizens because there's no way to upgrade that functionality and fix that cryptographic implementation remotely. We've also seen instances where, for example, your iOS operating system, and of course your jailbreakers will come, and of course it's always a cat and mouse to some extent. They say, oh, we break this, and then Apple will come and try to fix something. But there were a couple of recent attacks where they said this part that we have exploited, unfortunately, is not something that Apple can upgrade over the air as well. So again, there will be some cases where it unfortunately will mean that that account upgradability is a problem for hardware. In our case, because it's still kind of a firmware, but it's a virtual firmware, and we do have remote over-the-air upgrade mechanisms. We have used those mechanisms before for upgrades for customers where they wanted to push out new updates to their end users without having to wait for the App Store and Play Store to approve the new applications.
Okay.
The other benefit actually is that there are a lot of UX benefits to being in the mobile application. So you think about it, for example, if it's very easy to trick the user into approving a particular transaction or login. And if the user has no context around what he or she is approving, that means that, the user is given a dialog box and says, do you want to authorize this? And they think they're authorizing transaction A, but the attacker may have actually replaced that with transaction B. So one example, for example, is, let's say I want to do an internet banking transaction. Okay? The attacker does something and says, okay, I'm transferring $10,000 to this account. The user's PC has been compromised. When they key the account number, the attacker actually replaces the account number with something else. Okay? If you think about it, in a traditional SMS one-time password or even a hardware token, the user just keys in, gets a one-time password, they key into the website, and the bank says, yes, it's authorized. But they have no way to tell the user that actually this transaction is now going to party XYZ rather than ABC that you wanted. But in a software approach, we actually can do that through our secure messaging solution. The bank can actually send the information to the mobile application. The user actually sees what they're authorizing. And then when they click yes and they use their face or they enter a PIN and that data goes into view as, we know that the user has actually authorized the exact transaction that the bank has prompted them to do so. So this actually means that from an end-to-end security perspective, software solutions can be more secure than hardware. And by combining the two, software and hardware, we can actually come up with a very robust solution for the end user.
Yeah, and we are, the plan we have is to maybe use sort of the key store on, say, that come from the operating system, and then but leverage sort of your environment for the actual secure runtime of our application. That's the plan. How do you look upon our because I think a mobile app having this wallet security required in order to hold a balance and to do transactions, to sign off transactions. How do you, as a security expert, would you view the security level that we can achieve? How safe is it? How worried do you have to be, or the banks have to be?
Yeah, it's funny, I think for all of us in this world of whether it's digital cash or digital transactions or digital transformation, I still remember having a lot of conversations with people like Visa and MasterCard and even your closed loop wallets and all that. And I think all of us do recognize in the end, actually, we're not fighting each other. We're always fighting against cash. We're always fighting against hardware, really, right? Where there's physical cards and so on. And I think all of us are trying to find ways to make sure that it is as secure and convenient as cash or as maybe prepaid cash cards of some form or other. Because there are so many benefits to digital transactions. But you're absolutely correct. The confidence, then the trust that we can put in this will depend on how much we know that the security, even the confidentiality of these transactions can be protected. Now, there are a lot of kind of security problems that need to be addressed so that we can know that we can trust this system fully from an end-to-end perspective. I mentioned a couple of them already: confidentiality, integrity. Actually, another interesting one is privacy. Privacy, I know you guys address that quite well, actually. I think even as a company, we are starting to work with a few other partners around privacy-focused solutions, which I think is fantastic in Asia. I think there's increasing awareness around privacy solutions and privacy requirements as well. And if you really want to replace cash or cash-like bearer instruments with equivalents, all these pieces need to be in place. I actually do think that we have a very robust solution. I know you guys have thought very strongly about this, very deeply about the architectures for this. And obviously from different perspectives, we can come in to support some aspects of those as well. I think it's also important to recognize that cash is also not without its share of security problems.
Counterfeiting, you've heard that word, sort of, that people are, so cash is not 100% secure either.
That's right. And it's also not cost-free. Even in Singapore, right, there's been a huge drive to try to replace cash around, especially payments. And I mean, I think like in many countries in Asia, we have so many ATM machines dotting the whole island, right? But I think one thing that people don't realize is that there's a lot of money being paid to security guards every day to deliver cash, to collect cash, to move it around, to monitor everything. Of course, the software for everything, for the central banks to, print all the new dollar notes, to clean everything, make sure everything is still working properly and everything. So cash actually does have a fairly high cost that is not often fully recognized. And there is a security cost to it that is not often, may not be fully socialized as well. But there are still real costs to the banks, and in many cases to the businesses who are forced to deal with cash.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is like where you guys are from, but in Singapore,
Sweden is almost going cashless now. We are less than 10% of our retail.
Yeah, exactly, right. Of course, the banks are pushing everybody to do it, but for example, if you have to deposit a whole bunch of coins with them, they will charge you for the deposit, right? They don't really want to take a whole bunch of coins and to sieve through all of it and so on. Actually, and of course, cash itself can be stolen, right? Cash also can be laundered, and there's a whole bunch of problems around cash that actually, if you do a side-by-side comparison, we are actually at a stage where, especially with the solutions that we've built together, I think we have reached a level that, there will be always some pros and cons when you move from one kind of channel to another, right? So just like how we talk about hardware, I would never claim that I am better than hardware in every single way, right? But, and there are pros and cons, and if we can leverage on the best of breed of both, great. But in many situations, actually a pure software solution will be seen as preferable to using hardware. And in similarly, we have seen many countries, both at the national levels, many cases from the private sector level, move towards pure cashless societies, and move towards, in many cases, offline types of transactions as well, increasingly. For example, even with Visa and MasterCard with their tokenization, which later became cloud-based payments, I think was really a very highly structured architecture to address the problem of what effectively is a cashless transaction, because it can be offline, right? I was actually working with Visa in the early days of the project. I still remember we were pouring through a 300-page architecture diagram on cloud-based payments and mobile wallets and all that. I was like, wow, okay, you guys are serious about this. But I think what really excites me is that you guys are effectively doing the same thing, kind of in a closed-loop payment space, right? So, not necessarily riding on the four-party Visa and MasterCard system, but offering the similar functionality, and thinking about it from the same perspective. And so just like I think what we're seeing in tokenization for Apple Pay and your Google Pay and your OEM Pays, actually, it's not that we are thinking, oh, every component must be perfect for the system to work, right? But we are able to put in place mechanisms which can give us a confidence that yes, this actually is secure, and even with some of these possible attacks in place, we are able to protect against them and able to remediate against the fraud or the hacking that can occur.
Yeah. And I think there are things that we can put in place here. I think one thing that I discussed is an interview that was on Friday with Shantanu Shirke. We talk about reconciliation will be important for the issuing bank, that they can reconcile what's going on in this sort of offline mode. But there are things you can do. It's quite interesting. People have heard about, you can use PIN codes. People are used to that. Biometrics is sort of using your thumb or your, something on your body. But it's also behavioral biometrics, which is a new area coming in as well, which I think it's that they were able to detect sort of how you are actually interacting with your device, and they can give you a score for, this doesn't look like it's you. This is probably someone else, a bot, or someone else is trying to use your wallet, and then the bank could cut that wallet off. You can't load any more money on it, and in that way contain that risk quite nicely.
That's correct. And yeah, there are ways you can do step-up authentication, or you say, oh, this looks risky, please call the bank, or please verify your account. So there are ways we can respond to that as well. We actually did do a project with a very large payment wallet to actually move their risk engine into US. So yes, there's a lot of stuff that you can do around behavioral biometrics. I think there is a very big space for that to complement kind of hard rules based, right? Yeah. So you can always say, yes, sure, I want facial recognition. You need to know your PIN, or maybe you can store 20 transactions offline after you need to go online again, to reconcile everything, or you need a counter. There's a lot of stuff, as you can say, as you said, that we're kind of familiar from the old world as well. Yeah. And there's a lot of new stuff that we can add onto it. I still remember, in fact, in my interview with the Ministry of Defense, they asked me, computer security is really new. What have you done around security? I'm like, obviously it's really new. It's not like I'm a hacker or anything, but I did tell them, at the time, Singapore was using magnetic fare cards for the public transport system, right? And, here I was, engineer, computer scientist, and I told them, look, this thing is really insecure. This magnetic stripe here is just an identity. Okay, I don't know whether it's storing the actual balance. I doubt it. No, it probably does have actual balance, because, I can't imagine that all these fare gates are all connected to some central database in real time, which, as I learned later, it wasn't. But I'm like, I could just probably read this, duplicate it, or, I top up $50, I go and buy a whole bunch of stuff, then I restore it back to the older magnetic stripe, and I go buy a bunch of stuff again. So you're absolutely correct. But I learned quite a bit later, actually, when a lot of these discussions around offline cash started, that yes, how they dealt with it at that time was around reconciliation, right? So at least at the end of the day, they synchronize everything up, and they say, oh, no, this doesn't match. This guy's fare card looks like it's been tampered with. We're going to block this now. We'll start an investigation. We'll look at the CCTV cameras, make a police report, and then, okay, we'll deal with it in that way, right? Okay, so possible loss, $200, but we catch a guy and it's done. Nobody will ever dare do it again. So like, oh, okay, so people are kind of used to that system already. And so I think there's a lot of acceptance that in the absolute worst case, we can fall back to that. And actually, as you have said, with a lot of the newer mechanisms that come on board, actually the risk can even be further mitigated in real time. And a lot of stuff that we are doing with you guys helps to mitigate a lot of those attacks. And yeah, it's like, wow, such a system, why wouldn't you deploy offline cash, actually?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's amazing to me that we come here, we're not from the payment space, and we just think of this idea that why don't you split the process of a payment transaction in two? You do an offline, so the merchant can let go of the customer. That's one step. And then as a subsequent step, you can move money in the online world between accounts. But don't you see them as one? Because all of a sudden, with a stroke of magic, we're making ourselves independent from anything that could go wrong in this quite sensitive online world. And the beauty with this is that our system is, the system we built is compliant with the online world, because the online world doesn't know whether the transaction has happened 10 minutes ago, or if it's sent at the moment, the moment of payment, which is, so we're not changing anything. We just sort of, thanks to digital trust, or the sort of security that you are very key to us to provide, we're able to deliver on something which is quite cash-like in a digital form.
Yeah, absolutely. So I still remember the first time you guys presented, like, wow, finally.
No, and we were very happy to have found you as well, Joseph, because I think Paul, our CTO, he I don't know how he found you, but I think it was really exciting that he was very excited that, oh, I think I found the company who can give us the trust level that will be required, I think, because let's face it, we're dealing with money, and it's, as long as it's money involved, I think there will be people who will try to make some extra buck by, like you, with your Singaporean card. You know, I think that's happening. No, I think it's great interest here, and we're very, very happy from our side that we have you as having our backs when it comes to security. I think we have all the people, Raymond, Eugene, and Shanghai, everybody we work with in the organization has been fantastic. So you do have a great team, and you're fun to work with as well. So we
thank you.
Yeah. So I think this is a partnership, and that's actually, I like the fact how you will go about it. I talked to Raymond a lot, your COO, about you building a sort of a digital trust sort of partnering platform, and I really want to replicate that, but building that around a digital cash partnering platform, because this company I talked to you about, by behavioral biometrics, I think maybe you have your plans to do this on your own, but otherwise I'm happy to connect you to my partner network, because I think we are some cool companies here, sized like we are 25, you're 100, and we are really the innovators, I think, in the space at the moment, and we can help each other to get scale fairly quickly.
Yeah, I think actually from the early days, partnerships have been very critical to us. First and foremost, even we didn't want to go and do this by ourselves, just selling it, right? So we from the very beginning relied very heavily on partners to kind of engage with our customers, to understand their use cases, but especially when it comes to solving problems in our new digital economy around digital transactions, there are so many different problems that need to be solved. And as I said, really in the end, we are not competing against each other. We are not fighting against each other. There's so many different problems that, I can't do anything by myself, right? Yeah. And I think it's really important for us to be able to collaborate, because in the end, even the problems that we're trying to solve for a customer, they do just want a solution that solves their problem end to end, right? Yeah. And I want to be able to do, one thing really well. Of course, I try to do a few things around that one thing really well, but even then, I'm not going to solve all the problems under the sun.
No, I feel the same. I want to do my part really, really well, and I want to build an ecosystem of partners which I very easily interface with, and I can get scale from sort of just like the announcement we did with e-currency. Just think of it. So they are a platform provider to central banks, and the central bank is going to implement sort of digital cash basically into their country, and they're going to push it through. So every single sort of payment service of that country, more or less, will also use their currency. So by partnering with e-currency here, which I believe will be one of the stronger players here in the future around this area, all of a sudden we are going on a national level into many of these, and many of them will need, in order to do higher value transaction, I think they want your security. The banks will want to have that. Otherwise, I think they will feel insecure, and there will be threats that you mitigate.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely looking forward to really supporting all these use cases.
Match in heaven, and thanks so much for explaining a little bit and showing off with all your fantastic knowledge that you have in this.
That's it. Forgive me, I did used to be the CTO.
No. I loved it, and I think every time I talk to you, Joseph, I learn something new, and your whole team is just, we are a techie bunch here around what we do here in Sweden. We pride ourselves, but so are you. You're really a techie team, and that's why I think we have a lot of mind share. It's easy to talk to you, and I think you find it quite easy to interact with our team as well, because we share our love for technology and trying to bring that to the world, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. No, let's close off, and I'll let you go. It's getting sort of for you to go home and for me to have my morning coffee. So and we're gonna air this on Monday. This is gonna be a great sort of a start for the theme week of mobile security. And thanks so much for being our partner. Thanks for doing the interview, and we're gonna have fun with this, Joseph, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Joseph.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.